we did, we've done September and October, and then next Monday, we'll do our priority 3.
So I would assume it can be difficult to stay in the strategic role, like when you're hearing a tactical report. So like your tactical team is getting a report when they're reporting on the scorecard, and it's almost like, you know, you're being invited down into the tactical role, right, in some ways. And I'll go ahead and say this, not everybody agrees with our concept of the tactical team needs to give regular reports to the board. There are those that believe when you do that, you're inviting the board into the weeds. You know, so why are you inviting the board into the weeds? My colleagues and I believe that we owe the board a specific report on how this stuff is going. A part of your charge through the Texas Education Code is the oversight of management. Like that's what it says. Like you hire a fire superintendent, you adopt the budget, and you oversee management. So in the absence of a process for that, then it's like, when are we overseeing? You know, like, is it just all of it? Is it just, you know, home getting text messages, you know, about the whatever? We think that the oversight of management deserves a structure, and that the board needs a structure to get on into this tactical stuff. Like it should be the way that we hardwire this. So when you're hearing those reports, did you have something, Liz?
I was just gonna say, and then I mean, it's important because when you're sharing with the board, you're also sharing with the community.
That's correct.
All those board meetings are televised,
That's correct.
televised, that's the old word. but
Streamed.
Streamed, yeah. I mean, we need people that are watching to see something happening in that board meeting, and so they can know what's going on.
Right, and later, we won't do it right now, but there's a handout here that I think I might have seen before, but I might have, y'all were one of the early ones on this journey, and so this might be a new handout. But it's literally a list of 26 questions that are good questions. We'll dig it out in a minute. There's good questions for the board to ask during these reports. So, you know, it might, Ms. Timmerman, it might be that you're hearing something on priority 2 with staff satisfaction, and instead of, you know, asking, I'm not saying you did this, but I'm just going to use that as an example. So instead of, you know, saying, why is Susie mad, or why is that whole group mad at elementary A, you know, the strategic way to ask that may be, how do we know, you know, what the level of satisfaction is at all our elementaries? Like, okay, so see, that's a fair question, right? Like, not, you know, I happened to be at elementary whatever the other day, and they were all upset. So it's hard, but you almost have to like back up and step up and then say, I'm going to ask, well, I like to say, don't ask why it's painted red, ask what our process is for determining paint colors. Like that's the best example I can give. What's our process? And then, you know, what I would advise Dr. Hollingworth and every other superintendent is, if, you know, a board member ever asks what's our process, if we have it, put it in the Friday update. If we don't have it by the Friday after next, and in the next Friday after next. Because I don't think we can overdo, I don't think we should think of schools like manufacturing where every process is just, you know, down to the nth degree. But I do think we should have the basic structure of any process that a board might ask about, especially during one of these reports, not at least sketched out in a one-page. And I know the superintendent, I just said, if the board says, what is our process, you know, like that night, put it in my hand. Like when we leave the board meeting, put it in my hand, because I want to look at it before we put it in the Friday board update. And then, you know, my direct reports would say, it's in Wayne Prisky's head. You know, okay, get it out of Wayne Prisky's head and get it in a step-by-step process, and let's share it. And the more we got that out of people's head and got it in writing, the better I felt like we were getting as a district. So anyway, that's a little bit, you know, maybe a takeaway for tonight, that we're going to ask the board to think process-wise. So now, you know, the superintendent, by the way, who's in this box right here? Superintendent. So he's helping the tactical team, you know, and some of the tactical teams sitting in the back. Your A team, you know, is back there. So they're thinking now, okay, let's start thinking about process. I know for a fact, 2 or 3 of them and I, when we're Zooming, like we're working on processes, right? And things to present to the board in conjunction with this, where we can show you more of what the process looks like. so that maybe it answers the question before it's asked. All right, Dr. Harmsworth, anything else you can think of on, how does this structure make you feel? I'm asking a feel question, so when you look at that, how does that make you feel?
Well, I think it's just, I think it's really good for us to look at it, and I think it's really good for board members to kind of reconsider, and have thoughts about where do I tend to operate? Am I operating in that strategic role, that 50,000-foot role, or do I occasionally slip down into a tactical or operational role? And that's a piece that, I think that's worthy of thought.
Yeah,
That's how it makes me feel.
thank you for that. And I know when y'all are getting large enough, or you are already large enough, and you will continue to get larger, that just like we're right now tonight in this training, we're kind of talking about the relationship between the strategic and the tactical. I think as a superintendent, like, am I getting down in the operational role too much? Like, do I have someone who's really in charge of that? And so instead, I'm the superintendent. I'm actually receiving a paycheck for this work. But if I've got a curriculum person that's over something, I don't need to go directly to that elementary and start telling them how to fix something. Does that make sense? Like, it kind of put me back, especially in the structure that y'all are building now. It's a good structure. So it kind of put me in check too. I know in church say, we want you to do classroom walkthroughs with us as a superintendent. All right, I'll do it. Is this a picture for Twitter? Or, or do you want me part of the instructional rounds team? Well, we don't really want you part of the instructional rounds team. It's like, okay, then let's be clear, it's a picture for Twitter. If I'm going to one of them, I'm going to all of them, and I've got to be trained and calibrated. Otherwise, what am I going to do? And they're potentially mess it up, even though my background's in curriculum.
One of the big things in the tactical thing for me, and this is one that I found within the first, 3 or 4 months, and we've worked a lot on with my cabinet, which is who's in charge.
Yeah.
Because what I found is that there were several functions where we might have 4 people
Yep.
who have a hand in it, but in my experience, if I gotta have somebody who's in charge. Somebody's
Okay,
responsible.
this is really important to this structure. See, now we're not between these two. He's trying to get clarity between these two, like that. And I love what you're saying, because you can't talk. How many employees do you have?
Well, we've got 1,650 employees.
Okay, so that's gonna go to 2,000 and to 2,500 and 3,000. On a day-to-day basis, the superintendent, we had 274 in Graham. I remember it well, which is the same that we had at Steele High School and SUC. So like the whole district in Graham had the same amount of employees as one of our high schools. But I still felt like as a superintendent in Graham, I couldn't get to all 274, so I've got to have structure. I've got to have some people that I can make sure I can trust and listen to give me accuracy about what's really going on. Not just tell me what I want to hear, but tell me what's really going on. And if, I hate to say that, kind of use, well, I really hate to say it, but I'm going to say it now, like, it's The Godfather. I admitted, like, I watched The Godfather 150 times, and if it was on tonight when I get home and I'm tired, I'll watch it again. My boss demands to know bad news immediately. You remember Robert Duvall in the middle of dinner, Well, it was kind of that, like, I want bad news by text. You can give me good news when I get back to the office. Bad news by text, wherever I am. It's kind of that same, like, I need to know so I can help the board know about it as timely as we can. So you have to have structure to do that, is my point, right? And that's why you're asking who's in charge. And that can feel a little clinical and a little, technical, but you're trying to get this team that you can talk to, right, that can have information going up to you so that you have accuracy at any given moment, right? Any other thoughts? Okay. All right. Mr. Schofield, you're here. So all I'm trying to do by bringing up your name is transfer responsibility to the pop test to you and off of me, because we were waiting for everybody to be here. We committed way back when to take our good governance inventory and our team trust self-analysis. Again, they're back there in the packet somewhere, good governance inventory and team trust self-analysis. If you don't mind, lay them both out in front of you. Team trust is on one page, team trust is on 2 pages, good governance is on 1. And I forgot to ask you, Dr. Hollingsworth, on, do you, and Mr. President, do you want the we to be the 8 of you? Or just 7? Like when this says we.
What's standard? I mean, I would
Well,
think.
I think the first time we did it, we did not do it, because you hadn't been here very long.
Right. Now,
Now, at a
As the
certain
8
point,
of
I
us.
think
Yeah,
it's
no, I think
eight
that
of
makes
it.
sense.
Is
No, I
everybody
agree
good
with
with that? Like the first time, I think we said, no, it's just 7 because he's only been here a few months. So the we on here is the 8 of you. So when, on the team trust, when it says we, that's the board plus the superintendent, or otherwise known as the team of 8, when it says we. And then it likewise take the good governance inventory, Dr. H, because that's, like you're part of this structure also. So we'll have 8 responses on these, and we have some assistants tonight, thank goodness, to help. Okay, she's already delegated it to the team. But we do want this to be anonymous. So but I want you to have your version of that. Y'all may remember doing this before. So up in the upper right-hand corner, make a symbol or something that means something to you and not necessarily to someone else, so I can hand them back to you here in a little bit. So for me, I would put the brand that we have on our cattle. And that wouldn't mean anything to anyone here, but I would know it's mine. And we're gonna take about 5 minutes to just go ahead and take these. And if you remember, there's no right or wrong, it's just your gut feeling.
Clarify again, we, team of 8?
We is team of 8, yes ma'am, very good question.
You said the good governance is 2 pages, and then
The team trust is 2, good governance is 1.
good governance is 1.
Yeah, there's 18
Gotcha.
indicators, only 1 page.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we have Bryce Waterhouse Cooper going to work on tabulating results. Shall we, or just? Oh, okay, sorry. Need to stand. All right. I'll make them stand with you. I've been sitting in a car all day. So let's, as those are being tabulated, let's go back to the scorecard for just a little bit and talk. And then in the very back of the packet is a model that we like to use on aligning arrows. And Mr. President, right there at the back of that, no, you, okay, you're looking at it, thank you. Like at the end of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, these statements kind of start out similar and then they change at the end. Do you mind, like, what's the difference between stage 1 and stage 2? It's at the end of the written statement. Like, what's the big difference between those two? What's the last thing that the first one says and the last one that the second says?
Goals are poorly defined.
Yeah, goals are poorly defined. And then look at stage 2. How does it end?
Strategy and quantitative goals are being defined.
All right, being defined, so poorly defined, being defined. Now keep going, sir, please, 3.
Process address key strategies and goals.
Yeah, so now your processes are starting to address key strategies and goals. And then 4, please.
Processes and measures track progress on key strategic and sustainable goals.
Okay, so now you're tracking and you're making sure they're sustainable. Now, think about the arrows, kind of keep that out there, and then now go to the scorecard. Like y'all got your current scorecard. So goals poorly defined, to goals are starting to be defined and we're tracking them, to goals having progress measures assigned to them, to goals and processes. Now we're moving over here to the processes that we were talking about earlier. Yes, sir. Yeah, so talk, like Dr. H, where do you think Waxahachie ISD is? Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then why?
Stage 2.
Okay.
A year ago, we might argue that we were stage 1. I'm not speaking to what we had in place before, but as far as now, I think our strategy and quantitative goals are being defined. And that's something that we're working on a regular basis, that David Averitt is working on a regular basis and leading that process.
All right, so then look at 3. Thank you. I mean, that makes sense to me, and it's not that, like a year ago when I was first sitting here, if I would have said, put your goals in my hand,
Right.
that would have been a struggle, right? No?
Yeah, I mean, we had our dip and our
Okay,
sips,
all right.
you know, we'd have those, but those were scattered. They were across the board, varied by campus.
Right. And so you're right, so you might have stacked up 18
Yep.
campus improvement plans when I said, put your goals in my hand.
Right.
Okay, and I would have said, how's that working for you? You know, does
Yeah.
anybody know what's in any of this, you know, after I've dropped it all to the ground? So point is now the board has adopted column 1 and column 2 and the belief, mission, and vision, right?
Right,
And so now if I ask that same question, this is what you would hand me, right?
100%.
Okay, so then look at the difference, if you don't mind, if you keep playing along here. Let's talk about in the next year and emerging from 2 to 3. Like, look at the difference between 2 to 3, and then how does, in your mind, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, what it looks like for us is we have to take this and you operationalize it. I mean, we have to make sure that this is impacting the daily work and that people see this as being tied to their daily work. And that's new. I mean, that's not something, and we're not there yet. We're not at a place where people are regularly going, now where is that in the balanced
And where does
scorecard?
that fit?
We're having some conversations moving in that direction, but we're not there yet.
So would you agree, and I think this is good for the board to maybe think about and or even talk about, the movement from stage 1 to stage 2 is probably faster than the movement from stage 2 to stage 3.
Yeah.
Does everybody agree with that? Like, if you do it right? Like, we can say we're at stage 3 if we want to, you know, be in an echo chamber and make our, but it may take a couple of years.
No doubt.
Is that fair to say? And I know when I'm zooming and we're, you know, I know David's like, okay, hold on, we gotta get that cleaner and clearer so people understand what we're saying when we have this key strategic action. So if you look at stage 3, the president, you know, processes are starting to be clearer and aligned to the objectives. So that's column 3. These actions and processes now, we're doing them more, we're doing them with efficacy. And have you all abandoned anything that you thought was gonna be the action yet? Like, you started down the road and it's like, it didn't work.
I know that's been some of y'all's conversation.
Yeah, so what we did, what we did after we had kind of felt like when you were working with us and we had a very large group, and we had a whole lot of things, we were just seeing what all would stick, we were throwing it at the wall. We came back, circled back, and brought in a smaller group for each one of the 4 priorities. And we looked really hard at each one of the key strategic actions and then the progress measures, and then we started parsing some of those things off. For example, 1.1A probably had 10 or 12 different measures, maps, interims. I mean, there were multiple things listed.
There might have been more than 12.
Yeah.
I was in here that day.
It was a
Yeah,
bunch.
there-
And we,
Well, and by the way,
Sorry, hold on.
I have 80 of these this last year. I've never seen that list be just right the first time. It's either too few or too many. And in this case, it was too many. Like, it was like, what of the 50, like, you can look at different dials and see what's going on, right, in your work. Like, it's like, what are the most important 4 or 5 dials we should be really paying attention to? My car that I drove in on my wife's car, I'm traveling this week, has a computer chip that monitors 1,000 things, right? Like, and if something's going wrong, it'll put a light up for me. I'm looking at fuel, miles per hour, oil pressure, and water temperature, right? Like, that's, well, what radio station I'm on, what podcast I'm on, like, that's what I'm monitoring. So for me, driving, those are the 4 or 5 that are the most important for me to monitor, especially the fuel. And I did something I haven't done in a long time, I forgot to get gas a couple of months ago. That's a bad feeling. So, you know, I went right through the last station, and I did something I never thought I could do. I turned around and went back, because it's closer to the town I was 9 miles back this way, and I had 8 on the thing, it said you have 8. So anyway, I literally topped a hill and coasted into a 7-Eleven right on the corner. And now that it's exhilarating, now that I think about it, it wasn't exhilarating at the time. But I wasn't paying attention to the fuel gauge, is what I'm saying. And I was talking on the phone while I was driving, and I wasn't paying attention to the fuel gauge. I should have been paying attention to the fuel gauge. So you guys went through an exercise of trying to get to the right amount of dials that we need to look at. And is this on 11A, is this right now, or is it just like it's right today, as far as we know today?
I would say today, because I do think you talked about it a minute ago, we're still in we're walking, but we're still kind of toddling, and, you know, we're not running yet, I don't think. One of the things we also did in those small groups was, we had not defined our long-term desired outcomes, our X to Y by Zs. Those were almost all blank when we stopped working on it as a group. And so when we came back in our individual groups is when we started putting what the long-term desired outcomes were for each one of those subcategories. And so that way we were able to find things, where do we want to be and by when?
And so would you, to me, this is just, you know, kind of thinking out loud, but I think that's good, and that's why we're doing this tonight. There's a really good chance, if you get clarity on that outcome measure, that then you look back at column 3 and say, wait a minute, now that we've clarified that, that might have been the wrong action, now that we're clear about the needle we're trying to move at the end. So I would argue, as you're getting arrows aligned over this next year, the board probably needs to show a little grace on some of that happening. Does that make sense? The clearer we get on column 5, we may come back and you may say, wait a minute, I've got my hand up from 3 months ago, and this is a different set of key strategic actions. Well, we got clear about what we were trying to accomplish, and then that changed something back over here.
Well, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's why the
correct.
board adopts column 1 and column 2.
That's correct.
So that, we're able to make adjustments in 3, 4, and 5 as we need
That's
to.
Now, I think is a good time to say this. Some districts, after a couple of years, consider adopting column 5, the outcomes, after a couple of years. Like after they've really run it through the ringer, that we think that's the right dial. But they never adopt 3 and 4. Because you want the admin team, the tactical team, to have the agility or the ability to have the agility to pivot. Sorry to use that word, that's the most overused word this quarter, but to pivot if they need to, and you don't want them to have to come back to you to unadopt an action. Now, let me ask this to the board. As long as we got direction going towards column 2 that you adopted, y'all are telling him and them, you tell us what's the right way to get there. Is that right? Like, is that the structure? Some boards don't believe that.
Yeah.
But that, right, like y'all hired this team, the tactical team, right?
Yeah.
How many advanced degrees in public education and law, I'm looking back there, sit in this room to try to figure this out? You hired the team with all those degrees to figure out these 2 columns. I think in a year, after you go through this scorecard twice, personally, I think you should do a workshop just on column 5. Like just in a year, or, ish. But like as you guys go through it, and then when y'all feel like, okay, I think we're close to like what that outcome measure is, and I think just have a board workshop that you're just going down the 5th column. So when we say this over here, this is how we say we're measuring at the end. When we say this over here, this is how we say we're measuring at the end. So I'm gonna pause a little bit. Does that give anybody any heartburn or question or different than what you're hearing somewhere else? Or assume silence means proceed? Is that proceed? Okay, silence
Well, give me
means.
an example when you said some boards, what did you just say? I'm surprised at that. You said some boards. when it
Take
comes to
issue with
call-
that, or that they're not
Yeah.
comfortable with giving the reins to the administration on
Yeah,
this.
we've got more than one that they want to adopt the actions.
Oh, okay.
And we're saying, we're going to get an update on them once a quarter, once a semester. You really want them adopted so that if they make a decision over here in a curriculum meeting, we gotta call a board workshop to tell you that they're changing.
Yeah.
And usually when I say it like that, they go, well, no, never mind. It's an extra
Yeah.
meeting for us. Yes, it's an extra item on an agenda, or it's an extra meeting. So it's not, so here's thank you for that question, because you're not doing anything irresponsible. I think you're doing something very responsible by saying you're the tactical team, get that middle stuff done and done right. Now, where I think some boards go wrong on the other side is they give that authority over, if you will, but then they never ask how it's going
Right.
until it's a problem. And so they only hear a report if something didn't work out. They never hear a report when something's going well. Well, they might hear that one, because we're good at bragging, our stuff, but they never hear just kind of it looks about right. We're still monitoring it, but it looks about right. We took our map data, and we think we got third, fourth, fifth grade heading in the right direction. There's something going on wonky in sixth grade. I'm just making stuff up here, but so like y'all are hearing this interim report, kind of getting this feel for where it's going. And I want to say this in front of everybody, including the team that's helping, make the reports to the board. And I know you've said this. I've been in your presence, but we don't need the board reporting to just be a sugar-coated, everything's great in River City. I mean, if there's something that doesn't look quite right, we need to report it. So like you mentioned staff earlier, if we take a mid-year staff satisfaction survey, or, with a small group or something, and we're really low in this, we ought to tell the board, like, there's something going on here, that we're trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah, we've specifically said that to not just this group, but to principals. We really intend for those, and we've only done it twice, but those ongoing monthly reports that you're gonna get on our progress to include both. Hey, here's what we feel like we're doing really well. Here are some areas where we know we can get better.
Yeah, and that's rare, and I think for your admin team to commit to telling y'all what needs work, that's pretty rare. Like, it's usually just PowerPoints and parades for the board. Like that, but I think this is a better approach to getting better, to report it as it is. And let me ask the board this, if Dr. Hongsworth comes in and he says, this isn't right, will you all accept that? If he says, but this is what we think we're going to do to make the adjustment to make it right?
Absolutely.
So they already crunched it.
Uh-huh.
Golly. Okay. They put it in the spreadsheet. Yeah, that's just crazy. Can y'all go with me next Tuesday to Socorro? I'm sorry, someone was saying.
So that's,
Yeah, because wouldn't you rather know what's really going on? But now it may not feel good as a trustee if they just say this is broken, but you don't hear, but this is how we're adjusting, right? They should make the statement about here's how we're adjusting. All right, so how have y'all set up the board reporting, calendar initially? I know you'll listen to the board, but what's your cadence right now?
We started out, we did priority 2 was our first report in September, and then we switched over to the second report in October was priority 1.
Okay.
And because we wanted to get into October to have any kind of real look at what we were doing academically.
Gotcha.
Right?
Wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Let 30 more days of instruction. Okay.
Now priority 3 is coming up in November, and then we'll have priority 4 in December. Priority 4 is Ryan's world, it's financial accountability and all that. And so now we'll roll into that. We'll also have our LRPC results,
Yeah.
continued facilities plan.
Yeah.
So that kind of lines up there.
When is the audit? Like,
It's
when does the
15
board
months.
hear the audit
In
report?
December.
That's what I thought, so you kind of give another piece of data for priority 4 coinciding with the audit.
It was intentional, but yes, sir.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought, but that makes sense, like, you're kind of getting priority 4, all of it, including the audit.
And what our team has decided, and I think it's smart, we're gonna divide out priority 1 into 2 months.
Okay, that is good.
So we're gonna have
That's a lot.
priority A, priority B, 1A, 1B, and then we'll do 1C, 1D.
Yeah, that's good, because
Yeah.
that's a lot of lead
Yeah.
measures. Okay, then board, I want to pause, does that make sense? Like, instead of trying to take that bite all one meeting, break priority 1, look at the majority of your column 4, your progress measures, they live in priority 1, right? So you get 1. And when, that'll happen in the spring?
Yeah, we're gonna start, so in January, we'll do priority 1, A, and B. And then in February, we do priority 1, C, and D.
Okay. And you, the good thing about that also is that time of the year, you have most of your MOI, middle of the year data.
Exactly.
So you're getting an MOI, so BOI, MOI, EOI, so you're getting MOI. And I would assume next year, probably a lot of the fall report on priority 1 is your EOI. So last year's EOI is this year's BOI, right? Oftentimes,
That's
so
right.
it's a way to kind of anchor early in the fall. This is where we finished last year. So here's our anxiety. It's at this level in this subject. Like we're pointing all that out. Then we've identified that in the fall. Then in the spring, we're going to tell you how we think we're doing, with our map data or whatever data set we're bringing. All right. I know I'm kind of being repetitive, but it ain't any more complicated than that. Like that's really, so is that good with everybody? And does that cadence sound about right? I usually, you ran for the board probably this is true, I'm not talking about Waxahachie ISD. Any board member ran for the board probably for some topic in priority 1 or priority 2 or priority 3 or maybe priority 4. Now you're on the board, you have to be the trustee for all 4 priorities. You see what I'm saying? Like I had a board member argue with me the other night, she said, nope, I'm just here for teachers. And I said, oh, so you're not here for kids? Sure, no, I didn't say that. And I'm like, yeah, you did. You just literally says, I'm here for teachers. So she said, so you're telling me I have to pay attention to all 4 priority reports, not just priority 2. And I said, she's new trustee. And I said, yes, ma'am, that's what I'm saying. Like you're the trustee of all 4 of these priorities. And she accepted it well, and we were smiling and all of it. She was real honest, that she ran, for teachers, and that's all she cares about. And I was like, that makes you a 4th of a board member, because there's 3 other big buckets that you're supposed to be paying attention to at all times, student outcomes, community outcomes, and financial outcomes. And I joked, and I said, I bet you if y'all go broke next year, you'll become the board member for priority 4, Yeah, that's true statement. So, you need it. So so it kind of goes back to that strategic role. And the beauty of this is, like, y'all have a line of sight now on what you're trying to get done. A lot of districts do not have, like, clarity. Like, here's what we're trying to get done, these things. All right, anything else on the scorecard? Say anything that didn't make sense, or gave you a little heartburn or anything? Does that cadence of reporting that Dr. H mentioned sound about right? Especially like bifurcating priority 1. Say it one more time, for January, first part of 1.
January, we'll do the first half of 1, so we'll do 1A and 1B. And then in February, we'll do 1C, 1D.
Okay.
And then in March, we'll do priority 2.
Okay.
In April, we'll do priority 3.
All right.
And in May, we'll do priority 4.
Right.
So we had 4 in December, we have 4 in May.
Okay, then June, July, August, you start getting some of your outcome data in.
Right.
And so y'all can just decide, like, again, it might be good just, are y'all a September 1 or a July 1 budget?
September 1.
Yeah, so you'll have a budget workshop in there somewhere in August or something, or July, or both. Some of those can be relatively short, like just kind of here's where we are, like just the status report. I know in SCUC, they wanted to like do that, take a break, and then we did an outcome of all 4 priorities. So like an hour on budget, for 50 minutes, take a break, and then 50 minutes on outcomes in the summer. And, I'm not saying that's the way y'all have to do it, it's just that. Yeah, we were just out here in column 5, just saying, this is where we wound up, this is where we wound up, this is where we wound up. All right, everybody good? If I keep talking about it, you're gonna feel like you got the report tonight. There is one last piece of this, and then we'll look at this data and start bringing this ship back to the port. So there's a handout in there, before we leave the scorecard, one last thing, there's a handout in there that says indicator 2, setting a cadence of accountability by utilizing a balanced scorecard. It's on the letterhead, and indicator 2. So I won't go through the why and the what, because we just did all of that. But I do want to go to the second page, and it's the key questions for boards to consider. And Mr. President, do you remember if we looked at this before? And Dr. H, I don't.
I don't remember this.
Okay, I don't, all right, I think y'all were actually helping me a year ago, because y'all were asking some of these questions, and so I was putting, so this, I'm gonna give y'all credit for challenging these. So there are 3 sets of questions here, and I'll go ahead and talk about the first 2, but really the third set is the set of questions that goes right along with the scorecard reporting. So there's just broad questions, self-reflective questions from trustees. What am I hearing about in the community that I'm not seeing in board meetings? And where does that fit in our strategic plan? That's a good question to ask. What do I regularly see being discussed but not being resolved? Do I think about the district from a balanced lens? That's what we were just talking about. Okay, so then the second set of questions, these are just really good for you to kind of periodically talk about as a board, but does our agenda reflect what we're trying to accomplish? Your strategic plan. Are we adequately thinking and talking long-term? How would we collectively describe our culture? And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight, the strategic team. Are we keeping a balanced approach to thinking, talking, decision-making? Is the community environment changing in ways that's not embedded in our strategic direction? That's part of what the role of the board is. And y'all, in some districts I'm in, that number 2E might never be applicable. You guys, you may be growing fast enough at a certain point that you gotta make sure you're keeping up, with the growth. All right, so that's it for that set 1 and 2. So look at the set 3 of questions in here. These are, when you're hearing the scorecard reports that were discussed a while ago, this is a list of 26 questions. I'm not saying you need to only ask these. It's just a set of questions that might help you frame up something that you got a question that's happening in the scorecard report. Maybe here's a good way to ask it. This is kind of like the don't ask why it's painted red, ask what our process is, for selecting paint colors. So y'all look at those A through Z, well, that's interesting. So 26 questions. Tell me one that jumps out at you as, I don't understand that question, or I like that question.
How about D on number 3? How do our stakeholders know the services exist? How would we separate our marketing efforts?
Yeah, see, so you're hearing a report on some strategic actions that may be new. So this is a good way to just say, how do people, I know we're trying to do that, how do people know we're trying to do that? And that's a fair question, right? It's like, okay, Dr. H may say, we haven't marketed it well enough yet. That's probably why you are hearing that people don't know, that it exists. But does that make sense? I thank you for pointing that out, Ms. Krieger. I mean, that's a good strategic question. I'm gonna wait for another one. I taught 6th graders and 12th graders, so I'm gonna wait you out.
What's the best way for the board to help?
Yeah, I like that. I love the question, what else? And so I know you're around him, so I would and the board can ask that same question. What else do we need to know? What else can we do to help? I think that's a great question. And I liked asking, what else do I need to know? Y'all did a great job telling me everything you thought I needed to know. Now, what else do you think I need to know? Because there's always one more. There's one more little nugget that they say, no, don't give it to him, but there's always a little nugget left. Yep.
One question I have for you, just kind of in your experience and in working with other boards, et cetera, what do you think, Greg, is kind of the right, as far as when when we've given a report on progress on our balanced scorecard, what's the right amount of questioning to hear from the board and what's over the top?
Yeah, that's a good question, you know. 5, 10 minutes, like we were trying to hit 30 minutes for the reports, 20 minutes presentation over, 10 minutes open, you know, for questions. They're really, it shouldn't be crystal clear to board members, you know, like some part of it. And so we're encouraging the asking of questions on this very tactical report. These questions are meant to just like help frame up the way you might ask that. Because I know you all know this, my dad helped me this more than anything, because when I was a brand new superintendent, he was the board president. I was Superintendent Graham, and he was the board president in Breckenridge. So, you know, I built fence with him every Saturday for 10 years, you know, in Graham, and I heard everything through board president's lens. You know, like I felt pretty good about myself, 33 years old, superintendent in Graham, and he would knock me back to, you're like, you're missing it, son. You know, like the board didn't care about that, you know. But it helped me so much to just hear, like, just how a board member needs to hear the information. And this process started, just so you all know, really thinking about him. And he's not saying that they had it figured out. He was saying that they didn't have it figured out, and I needed to try to figure out a way to get the board what they needed to know. And what I also know is that he said sometimes board members ask questions and they're really trying to be helpful, but it sounds kind of in the weeds, and you and your direct reports talking to me as the superintendent get your feelings hurt, and you just need to get over it. You know, like there are some of the highest paid people in the community, just get over it. I thought that was good. However, I also thought, well, okay, that's true, but like if we could get better at how we ask the questions, we might not inadvertently ask it in a way that, you know, we kind of ding somebody without even meaning to. And then he also told me sometimes we'll ask a question that we really don't know the answer to, we're just trying to ding it.
But a few minutes of asking those questions at the end of that
I think that's very
presentation,
appropriate.
that's not,
I
that
think
would
it's
not be out.
desirable.
Yeah.
Not only I'm not neutral on it, I think it's desirable to have a few good questions. And that's why these are presented to you, to just help you start thinking about, okay, how could I ask a question or two to get at? And when in doubt, ask what else can the board do to help, right? That's a good, like what else can we do to help? The answer to that may be, well, in March, you're gonna hear a budget report, and when we're saying we're moving from this to this, it's because we're trying to get at, 2 point whatever. So just remember that, when you're asking what else can the board do, remember in March when we're talking about this budget thing. Clear
Well,
on
I think
that?
it's important to show that we're engaged, too. I mean, if we just get up there and rubber stamp everything, yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, some people could mistake us for not really, why are we there?
You probably have some questions too, and sometimes maybe you just don't ask it because you don't want to be the reason that the meeting is any longer than it has to be. I mean, I'm just speaking the truth here, but I think if you set aside, like try to really hit that, I don't know if it's 30 minutes, but 25 and then 5 Q&A, where you don't feel like there's an expectation during that 5 that the board asks a few questions. Like it's expected. And I don't know, have you all you must have been thinking about it because you split
Well, we
priority one.
haven't,
in
we
half.
haven't set a time limit, but I've kind of picked up that I think sometimes maybe our board views a little bit of they're either making the meeting too long or they shouldn't be asking all those questions. Why didn't we already ask that question? I think that's sometimes what's being thought. And I think this is could be a growth point for us. It's not necessarily a bad thing for us to have a few minutes and we're gonna have something real specific every board meeting. We're gonna have that balanced scorecard report. It's about the work, and that's something that's real appropriate for y'all to weigh in on and ask questions about.
I just thought of a question that, okay, I'm gonna assume it's on here, but you've heard a tactical report or maybe some progress measure out here, and then the board adopted every student grows academically every year in ELA, reading, math, science, and social studies. So a question could be, if I'm not quite clear about something over here in column 3 or column 4, help, like, give me, so the report's over, Dr. Hollingsworth or whoever, help me go back to 1.1C, measurement 3, and how does that get to our board adopted performance objective, blah, blah, blah. Do you see, like, that's a good question to me. Like, I'm a little unclear on how that growth measure connects back to that thing that we adopted. And if you ask that, I bet someone would be more than ready to show you how that dot connects, because that's their world. I'm trying to make sure that that dot connects back to what we're trying to move over here. And it may be when column 5's, more robustly finished, like we talked about, the question could go the other direction. When we're doing that action, how is that moving that number we're trying to move out there? That's a good strategic question to me. I think it would be good, ma'am, to ask that on a semi-regular basis. Now, if y'all get into 20, 30 minutes of questions and you got more questions than the report was, then I know you're board president. That's going to be no way no for him. So, but I think to be real clear, I do, Robert Westbrook was some of y'all may know him from the statewide board, but he was really clear about, let's really target 20 minutes for the report, and like up to 10 for questions. Like if you hit faster than that, that's okay, but, and I'm telling you, the first PowerPoint for the first priority 1 presentation was like a 95 slide PowerPoint. And I was like, you can't even sit there and just click slide to slide to slide and finish that in 20 minutes. Oh wait, well, I heard him say 20 minutes. Did he really mean? Yes, when Mr. Westbrook says 20 minutes, that means 19 minutes and 55 seconds. So we dumped down to like 10 slides. And in defense of those that presented it, sometimes they think so deeply and it's so granular in their mind that they don't know exactly how to crystallize it to its big picture essence, right? But there's 2 things I think that's really important about that. The first one is the most important one. The board doesn't need to know how all that was made. They just need to see that last thing, right? I always felt like it was important for us as leaders to be able to crystallize something back to its essence, no matter how complicated it was. And I know as a superintendent, I constantly looked at column 2 and column 5, and I'm gonna tell you all, I asked the question, how does this link back to what the board adopted? We just had a 30-minute conversation. The board adopted this, somebody tell me how that connects. Or this is the number we're trying to move over to the end, we just had a 35-minute conversation, I think I got most of it. I'm a superintendent, I probably should understand all of it, but I didn't understand all of it. But someone now give me 30 seconds. So what I'm saying is I think the board needs more of that. How does this action connect back to what we adopted, right? And then are we moving the needle? That's what y'all want to know. Is that fair enough, Mr. President? Sure. And then you're monitoring the performance of the district. All right. There's a term, ELMO. Are y'all familiar with that? Enough, let's move on. We're going to call Elmo.
Henry likes that.
And he's out. I forgot to say a while ago that you need to remember what your symbol is. I probably should have been clear to you. There it is now. I know one of them. Stars seem to be the.
One of them is less than anonymous.
Yeah, I just handed it to.
There was much restraint on
Have
adding to
I've never seen one of
the
those
logo.
Well, I should have the face.
Did not, I'm capable.
All right, I think maybe a good way to do this, and I'm staying aware of the time, and I'm really, to give, it's 3-hour credit, but there's enough work here for about an hour homework, so I'm looking closer to dose hours, if that's all right with you, Mr. President.
There's no objection here.
Okay, so there's two, and there will be really a good amount of things for y'all to think of afterwards. But in your packet, there's your first time that you took the good governance inventory. So I thought what might be interesting for you, let me go back to a year ago. You took it, and then this column 1 is color coded, and the legends across the top. So any one that's green, and there's not a green one, but in order to achieve green, it would be 7-0. And then if it's yellow, then the majority of the responses were yes, and, majority of the responses were yes. And then if it's orange, the majority of the responses were no or I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, so it's just like you can glance at it. If you remember when y'all took this first time, I said it's the first time you're taking it, like I literally walked in here and y'all took it in 5 minutes before we started doing anything else. There's no reason it shouldn't be a lot of orange on this, I said that. So here, and this feels really good, because now the second column is us taking it tonight, and I'll type this up for you, but if you want to record these responses, you can record them in this second column. But on 1.1, you had 8 yeses, 0 nos, and 0 don't knows. So you immediately moved 1.1 from 1 yes and 6 nos to 8 yeses. So we have collectively developed and formally adopted belief, mission, and vision. All right. Do y'all see over in the right-hand column, we said this will be addressed, when you adopt the scorecard. It appears that all 8 of you agree, we addressed it. So you got an 800 right off the bat. So then 1.2 is 7 yeses, 1 no, and 0 don't know on 1.2. Not quite there, but it's a big swing from 0 yeses, 7 no's the first time, right? 1.3, you have 5 yeses, 2 no's, and 1 don't know. All of that is green and or yellow, and they were all orange before. Does that make sense? So it's progress. Takes a couple of cycles of going through the scorecard, I think, for it all to get green, if that makes sense. But that's a substantial amount of positive direction. 2.1, you have 7 yeses, 1 no, and 0 don't knows. So again, not completely to green, but definitely headed the right direction. 2.2, you have 6 yeses, 2 no's, and 0 don't knows. 2.3, you have 5 yeses, 1 no, and 2 don't knows. So if you take 1 and 2 in its totality, the majority of the responses now are over in the yes column, even though they're not all over there on any given one, but the majority are over to the yes. So again, that's progress. So then 3.1, you have 4 yeses, 2 no's, and 2 I don't know. 3.2, you have 7 yeses, 1 no, 0 I don't know. 3.3, 6 yes, 2 no, and 0 I don't know. 4.1, 3 yeses, 4 no's, 1 I don't know. 4.2, 2 yeses, 3 no's, 3 I don't know. 4.3, 2 yeses, 3 no, 3 I don't know. 5.1, 7 yeses, 1 no, 0 I don't know. 5.2, 7 yeses, 1 no, 0 I don't know. 5.3, 3 yeses, 4 nos, 1 I don't know. And then 6.1, 5 yeses, 1 no, 2 I don't know. 6.2, 3 yeses, 1 no, 4 I don't know. And 6.3, 7 yeses, 0 no's, and 1 I don't know. Now, general observation, with the exception of some of the number 4, everything else is yellow. 5.3 might be an exception. But 4, the items in 4 and 5.3, so all this orange, let me just say it this way, all this orange went yellow, if you want to look at it that way. And then 1 of the yellows went green.
That's progress.
And that's progress, that's exactly right. And I think it would be an insincere assessment if, you know, it's just like you take it the second time and everything's green. So I'll color code these, Mr. President, and ship it back. And then this, now this will be full. Then we go out here and we think about, okay, we made some progress, now what's the next? And I'm really, Dr. Hollingsworth, I know we tried to like say, let's put something in every box over here. I think let's pick, now that we have a little tighter pattern, let's pick like 4. Number 4 in here. And like, let's really work on number 4. Like, let's do something in number 4. You have to try to get.
Pick one of the good guys.
I think if everybody likes that idea, like, let's don't try to do it all at once. You've got the scorecard going, let the scorecard's going to answer some of this. So, but like, let's pick one of the other ones, that's like low hanging fruit, like, let's get on that one. Now, 4 seems to be the one with the most diffusion, you know, of responses. I don't know, we might look at, there's only really 5 or 6 here that aren't yellow. Maybe we just look at the ones that are not yellow, right? That might be a better way to do it. So anyway, we'll color code it and then we'll have a follow-up conversation if that sounds all right. But you made a lot of progress on it and you're really close. This is gonna sound like I'm trying to pull one person out here and I'm not, because just because there was 1 no on several of them in 7 years, that doesn't mean that it was 1 person. That meant that at least 1 person, you know, felt like it was no. But we might, you know, there's some of these, if I may, and I apologize, I think I've told you all this before, my wife, she's riding by herself, so I asked her to text me when she starts and text me when she finishes. So she's getting on our 3-year-old cold right now, so she'll text me in a little bit, hopefully. But if you look at like 3.2, and again, I'm not trying to draw anyone out, but 7 yeses and 1 no, just to be clear, to regularly assess our progress in good governance expectations, like that's what we're doing.
Right now.
Right now. And so now, if I could maybe be that one that, okay, I'm waiting for the 3rd time. Because regularly, like now we've got a pattern. We didn't just do it twice. Does that make sense? Like, and I think your goal is to once a year, we think back to, like, where are we?
Yeah.
What's our progress?
It'll be a little redundant. I mean, y'all go, we're doing that same thing again? Yes, we are. And that creates that pattern.
Yeah, when this is all green, I think you're saying we can look to another instrument.
100%.
Like, let's get it green and then we'll look to another instrument. Now, I will say this, one thing that you all can do periodically is just, like, let's say I send the scorecard back completed with this column, give it 5 minutes at a board meeting. And you all talk about this difference between column 1 and column 2. You like model. So the district has a scorecard and we're hearing reports on it. The board has a scorecard and we're working on getting all of this orange and yellow to green. I think that would be a really good way to model. We're not asking the district to do something that we're not willing to do as a board ourselves. Does that make sense? And like your scorecard and your own good governance. All right, everybody good with that? Dr. H?
Yes, sir.
President, Mr. President, we good with the results? Okay. Let me check my agenda again, I apologize. I have the results, Mr. President, of the team dress self-analysis, and those are eligible for executive session. We did it that way the last time, and we do, it's pretty consistent statewide, we debrief those. But these are eligible. The good governance inventory is not, like, that's public forum, but this is eligible for executive session.
Which part?
The team trust self-analysis.
Okay.
If you, and we don't have to, but most districts do, they debrief that.
That's
and
fine, yeah.
Yeah, I think it just, the reason the statute allows that, because it lets you all really talk specifically about individual things, and that's eligible for.
And on your public agenda, you have an item, potentially closed session to deliberate regarding the employment, evaluation, reassessors.
Thank you.
Good.
can certainly do that.
The lawyer has spoken, thank you.
So I'll go back to item 2. At this time, we will go into closed session. According to section 551.001 at second of Texas Government Code, it is now 6:21. All right, you ready? Okay, so it's now 7:13. We will reconvene back into open session. Last item on our agenda would be a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Rogers.
Second.
Second by Ms. Krieger. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Give us their seat.